banish them. No, wait, that's like the opposite of my message. This is Karen's dog. Yeah? And so we're celebrating Karen today. And that's a beautiful dog, isn't it? It's a dog that we would definitely give a crust of bread to. Well, there's a lot of great scriptures today, and I'm looking at the clock. I'm going to touch on two of them real quick. The story of Joseph. This is, remember Jacob, who has name changed to Israel, and these are his kids, and he's got 12 kids. And Joseph is number 11. And he's the dreamer, remember? The great dreamer, and he's dreaming and having these dreams, and he decides to share them with his brothers. And he says to all of those brothers of his, they're 12 sons, by the way. And I know what living with 4 brothers was like. This is a bunch of brothers, 12 of them. And he says, I had this dream. I had this dream that there were 11 sheaves out there in the fields, and we were out there harvesting these sheaves. And all of your guys' sheaves bowed down to my sheaf. And that didn't go well. And he said, I had another dream. There were 11 stars in the sky and a sun and a moon, and they all were worshiping this other star that was me. That one didn't go so well. That was kind of, I think, the sort of dreams that he kept interpreting for them, that he kept having. Now, those dreams were from God, I believe, and the interpretation of them, maybe he could have done a better job in how he interpreted them, but it just so happened that those brothers resented every second of it. Now, one day his dad says, hey, go take some food out and visit your brothers, and they go see him, and they see him coming from a distance, and they go, here comes this dreamer. We can't stand this guy. Here he is, thinking he's so great. And by the way, Dad treated him much better than everybody else. And when he was easy to spot coming because he had this coat of many colors that we all hear about. So he had his fancy duds on, and he wasn't out there working with them, by the way. So they resented him, probably for good reason. We probably would have been right along with him in our resentment. And so he shows up. And they decide, well, let's get rid of him. In fact, let's kill him. And then one of the brothers says, no, Reuben, he says, let's not kill him. Why don't we sell him? We could sell him. And so they sell him. They sell him off into slavery, and off he goes. And he ends up in Egypt. They take that coat of many colors with blood on it, give it to their dad, and their dad is devastated. He's beyond being able to be consoled. He is just devastated. Well, he continues telling dreams in Egypt and interpreting dreams in Egypt, and he moves his way up the ranks quickly because his dreams are powerful. They saved the whole Egyptian nation from a huge famine. And so he gets put in charge of basically the supply of food, and they say, you gather up. He says, there's going to be 7 years of famine right after 7 years of great harvest, so he starts getting all this food together during the boom years. He's the number 2 man. He's right behind the Pharaoh. So he's like the second most powerful person in the whole empire of the Egyptian empire. He's got clout now. Years have gone by, and suddenly there are his brothers and his dad and their family and all their livestock dealing with famine. And they become refugees. They hear, man, there's some food we hear down in Egypt. And so off they go to save their lives with some food. Actually, Dad stays there, and he keeps Benjamin, Joseph's little brother, who's younger than him, the youngest, and because they brothers all know they could not stand to lose Benjamin after losing Joseph. Off they go. He tricks them a couple of times, makes them go back and get Benjamin, so he sees them all there and the dad, and they're all there, and he has this reconciliation with them. They don't even recognize him. He's in his Pharaoh outfit and all this stuff, they don't even recognize him, and he's long gone. In fact, they believe he's dead. He's been dead to death. And he said, I'm your brother. And he banishes everybody out of there, but they all heard there was a serious breakdown of weeping and reconciliation that happened between them. And he says that God, what you guys meant for harm for me, God meant for good so that we could all be saved. And so here they go, these Jewish people, these Hebrew people, who we'll talk about next, are people who are identified by the blood that runs through their veins. Those people are suddenly saved by Egyptian people. on, and we're going to have Moses. I think next week it's. And then there became a Pharaoh who didn't remember Joseph and his family or his story, and things kind of go south from there. Jesus is dealing with a group of his disciples, a group of his followers, and in Matthew's gospel is written to the Jewish community church, the Jewish church that's right around 70. Okay, so the Romans have come, destroyed everything. They're really in a bad way. They're being super oppressed, mainly because they're Jewish and because they're Christians, and they are being kind of the scapegoat of the Roman Empire at this time. So it's not a good time to be a Jewish person. And Matthew's gospel is written to that community of people who were there in Jerusalem under these times. And so this story is a very significant story. First thing that happens is he's down there by the lake, and he's with the country folk, where Jesus spent his ministry, by the way, with the poor, with the country people. And Jerusalem starts sending out the scribes and the Pharisees because they're hearing about how popular he's getting, and they come out and they say, well, you guys aren't practicing all the right rules. Well, these people were separate. The Jewish people were separate. It was a huge thing because of the blood that ran through their veins. They were a race. And they weren't a race that wanted anything to do with any other race. They wanted their race, and they wanted their race pure, right? So Jesus' ministry, almost 100% of it takes place with the Jewish people, and every once in a while he wanders over there and deals with the Samaritan people, who are basically Jewish people that happen to not keep their bloodline pure. And they hated Samaritan people, by the way. So that's how important race was to them. And they had made a ton of rules to keep them away from anyone else who wasn't Jewish, so that they could keep their race pure. And so Jesus is, that's the context. What Jesus says to these scribes and Pharisees is saying, you're not washing your hands right before you're eating a meal. You're not following our rules right that keep you separate from everybody else and keep us different from everyone else. Jesus says, it's not the food that I put into my mouth or your mouth that makes you defiled, makes you, I guess, impure. It's not what comes in. And he's pretty explicit in the Greek on it's not the food that goes in and leaves your body. It's what comes out of your mouth that makes you impure. It's the things you say. It's the things that come out of your heart that you know are evil and wrong. Those are the things that make you impure. Well, those guys probably wish they hadn't trekked all the way out from Jerusalem to hear that message. Because the poor folk all went. And the rich people that could afford to follow all the rules, they screamed. Well, right after that happened, okay, Jesus takes the only time in Matthew's gospel it ever mentions him leaving this group of people who were either Samaritans or the Jews. It's the only time, other than when he's a baby and he's ran off to Egypt. Kind of sounds familiar, right? Like Joseph and Moses. But other than that story in Matthew's gospel, this is the only time he leaves his people. And he goes off north 50 miles, and that's a long trek. And he goes off to this land of Tyre up there on the Mediterranean coast. And he leaves his country. Now, throughout all of Jesus' ministry, people gather around and want to be with him. It sounds like he's a lot of fun to be around, first of all. What's he accused of being by everybody, like the same scribes and Pharisees? You're a drunkard and you're a glutton. In other words, there's a big party everywhere you are. And so there was a big party that followed Jesus around, and also the people that came that had needs, the needs were met, they were healed, and all these things. And he's proclaiming the kingdom of heaven and saying it's for you guys. All of that's great news for these poor, oppressed people. But off he goes marching into this other land. And I'm sure his disciples are like, what in the world are we doing up here? Because this is a time when you walked, and you didn't walk out of your safe area. And he walked them up into a foreign land. But what are we doing up here? And they're looking around and saying, these guys are eating shrimp, and these guys are mixing their meat and their cheese. Holy moly, and they're wearing cotton blend. These guys aren't the right people to be around. These are the wrong people to be around. And every 3 years the scripture comes up. And this year I just read it a little bit different than I have in the past. I can just imagine Jesus taking them up there, and the party kept going all the way up there, and with these other people, suddenly the party's happening here, and they're probably like, wow, how is this happening? All these people are gathered around, and just like it is back in our place. But oh wait, these are the wrong ones. And then a woman starts following around and saying, have mercy on me. Have mercy. My daughter, she's really, really sick. Have mercy on me. Have mercy on my child. Any of you ever been there with God? God, have mercy on my child. You all have. And what does Jesus do? I think it's a lesson to his disciples. I think Matthew is giving a lesson to the church there. Because the church is wrestling with this whole, the gospel keeps going out past our boundaries. And that's troubling to us. What about them? We can't have them with us. And so Jesus says, well, hey, the disciples said, do something about this woman following us around, begging for mercy. Kind of reminds you of the Good Samaritan, right? The one who had mercy is the hero there. They couldn't even say the Samaritan. They had to say, well, I guess the hero is the one that had mercy. The Samaritan. And Jesus looks and says, why should I take care of her? You know why I'm here. I'm here for the lost sheep of Israel. I'm here for our folk. What do you mean? Pay attention to her. And he says, you know what? Why should I give the children's food to you? He says to that lady. I think this year, he's saying that as a lesson to his disciples. First of all, they're in a foreign land. They're out of their safety area. They must be thinking, quiet him down. We're going to get killed up here. But he says to this woman, why should I give the bread of heaven to you? And I think he's looking at his disciples. And she says, have mercy on me. Have mercy on my daughter. Even the dogs. Jesus called her a dog. Even the dogs get the crumbs, she said, that fall off the table. And Jesus says, I have not seen faith like that anywhere in our hometown amongst our people. I think that was a troubling story, situation that those disciples had to wrestle with. That was a story about foreign people, about race, about this great love of God, this chesed, this amazing love of God. How great is it? Oh my. It's great for us, right? It is great for us. It's great for them too. That's the trouble. Well, I'll just end with, if only these stories that we have of other people's families 4,000 years ago and Jesus walking around 2,000 years ago had any application for us today. Amen.